On Friday night, a man walked into a crowded theater in a major American metropolis. It wasn't the first time the man had been in this theater. He'd carefully scouted out hundreds of theaters around the country and had settled on this one for a very specific reason: its narrow walkways and relatively difficult-to-reach emergency exit doors. He had also carefully selected this precise moment in which to make his appearance, arriving during the Friday evening showing of the nation's most popular movie when the theater was guaranteed to be full. He'd even carefully selected his seat right in the middle of a long row and more or less in the middle of the theater. With the crowd mesmerized by the showing, the man was mesmerized by his plot. At just the right moment, he leapt to his feet and screamed, "Fire!" The panic was immediate. People jumped over rows to get away from the unseen fire, landing on others who were still seated in the process. Moviegoers echoed his shouts of fire and the crowd attempted to move all at once towards the few available exits. Dozens were trampled, some fatally. Many were seriously injured. It was all a sick hoax. There was no fire. The Supreme Court long ago considered this exact hypothetical scenario in the famous case, Schenck v. United States. Writing for the court, Justice Holmes wrote in dictum, "The most stringent protection of free speech would not protect a man in falsely shouting fire in a theater and causing a panic." The court was drawing a line. The First Amendment protects speech, but not all speech. False speech which poses a threat of harm can be regulated. First Amendment rights, like all other rights, can be limited. Limiting those rights requires careful thought and varying degrees of judicial scrutiny depending on the right being regulated: strict, intermediate or rational basis, but these rights are not, and cannot be, absolute. For some reason, many conservatives do not believe the same holds true for the Second Amendment. Bill O'Reilly, for instance, wrote on his website after the Las Vegas shooting that this is the price of freedom. Violent nuts are allowed to roam free until they do damage, no matter how threatening they are. The Second Amendment is clear that Americans have a right to arm themselves for protection. Even the loons. Other conservatives argue that even if Second Amendment rights could be limited, regulating guns is a waste of time and will never stop gun violence in the United States. Alternatively, they argue that perhaps some regulation would work, but it's not appropriate to politicize gun violence in the wake of a mass shooting and the matter is best deferred until some point in the future. This is all wrong. First, not only can Second Amendment rights be limited, they already are, from criminal background checks to concealed carry permits to gun registration laws and more. In the very case which established that the Second Amendment encompasses an individual right and not a collective right, as many have argued, Justice Scalia wrote in the court's opinion that like most rights, the right secured by the Second Amendment is not unlimited. And nothing in our opinion should be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibition on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualifications on the commercial sale of arms. The Supreme Court has, therefore, held that Second Amendment rights are not absolute. It has not, unfortunately, outlined precisely what is required in order to limit those rights. 2. Nevertheless, it has given clear examples of appropriate restrictions which already exist and which can help give guidance on additional future restrictions. Using Justice Scalia's list of acceptable restrictions from above, it should follow that any new regulations or resources which are designed to make the existing restrictions more effective stand a reasonable chance of being found constitutional. For example, improving the background check process should not cause any constitutional concern and may have helped prevent the Sutherland Springs church shooting on Sunday. Laws which prohibit felons from possessing firearms are, according to a study done by the New York Times, often easily circumvented or laxly enforced, and far more could be done to uphold them. Additionally, if automatic weapons can be illegal as a category, and they are, then presumably outlawing things like bump stocks which are designed to make semi-automatic guns replicate the action of an automatic gun would also be constitutional. This isn't to suggest that gun regulation is a black and white issue. It's complicated and likely only to become more complicated, but the idea that guns can be and are regulated is perfectly simple, and Bill O'Reilly's notion that the Second Amendment requires us to give free rein